I'd like to tell the folks about a place not far away. Victoria Harbour is its name, on lovely Georgian Bay. Canary Towne on Old Hawk Bay had lumber, fishing and games, with grain boats, tar boats, and lighthouse too, from the hill above the bay.
Hi, I'm Art Bergy. I'm a councillor in the township of Tay, and I represent people in Ward 2. Formerly, I sat on council representing the people of Victoria Harbour, and of course it was the last council representing Victoria Harbour. Victoria Harbour has a long history of events, and at one point in time it was called Canary Towne. But before we get into the story of Canary Towne, we have some local kids that are going to tell you what actually took place before Victoria Harbour or Canary Towne even existed. Let's listen.
Hello, my name is Tyler Arsenault, and I am a student at Victoria Harbour Public School, and I also live in Victoria Harbour. Long before the first European settlers arrived in what we now call Victoria Harbour, there were Wendat men, women, and children. Wendat are better known as the hero, a word coined by French sailors to describe the hairstyle of some of the Wendat men.
Hello, I'm Mark Todd. I'm also a student at Victoria Harbour Public School, now known as Georgian Shores Elementary School. 4 generations of Todds have lived in or near this village. The land of the Huron was Wendake, and it included the area from southern Georgian Bay to Lake Simcoe. The Wendat were an Iroquois-speaking people who, because of disease introduced by the French and war with the Iroquois, left their land in the mid-1600s.
It is safe to say that in the Victoria Harbour area there were several Wendat villages fortified with palisades and close to the Hog and Sturgeon rivers. They fished and traded goods with neighboring tribes and grew squash, beans, and corn.
Samuel de Champlain and Etienne Brule were probably 2 of the first tourists who ever visited this part of Canada. And more than 350 years ago, Jesuit priests from France traveled from village to village as they tried to spread the Christian gospel. Their headquarters, Ste. Marie, was just west of Victoria Harbour. The village of St. Ignace, to the south of Victoria Harbour, was the site of one of the most violent episodes in Canadian history, the martyrdom of Father Jean de Brebeuf and Father Gabriel Lalemant.
After the Jesuits and the Wendat left Wendake, the Iroquois lived here until they were replaced by other tribes from the north, notably the Ojibwe.
Few people realize that at the beginning of the 20th century, a shrine was built to honor the Jesuit martyrs just south of Victoria Harbour on the 7th concession of Tay. Miracles are reported to have taken place there. A 2-story hotel was built to accommodate the pilgrims who came by train and motor car from distant cities. This shrine was replaced in 1926 by the famous Martyr Shrine near Midland.
About 15 years later, during World War II, several older men from Victoria Harbour, including Daniel and Renee Latishier's great-grandfather, helped Mr. Kidd from the Royal Ontario Museum to excavate Ste. Marie.
And after that, Jerry Juneau, also known as Tex Juneau, worked for Wilford Jury when he excavated and reconstructed St. Marie. There were other men from Victoria Harbour who helped with the reconstruction of this well-known Tay Township historic site. I wonder what it was like camping out in those days. It must have been really rough.
This is a Jesuit priest with some of his helpers, and maybe they're paddling past Victoria Harbour.
This all happened long before Victoria Harbour was a village.
Hi again. The Midland Railway that passed through in Victoria Harbour in 1878 was originally called the Port Hope Lindsay Beaverton line, and that was charted in the 26th of December 1846. The line was leased to Grand Trunk, and Grand Trunk built the first railway station in Victoria Harbour between the years of 1884 and 1893. And it was from this viewpoint that travelers passing on the railway viewed Victoria Harbour and nicknamed it Canary Towne as they stood in amazement. As they looked out the windows and stared in amazement at all the buildings, offices, and houses all painted yellow. I mean, if you can imagine it yourself, what a spectacle it could have been. But that's a brief history on how actually it got Canary Towne. And at this point in time, I'd like to take Heritage's, Victoria Harbour's pride and joy, to give you the facts.
Hello, my name is Christina Hudson, and I am a member of Victoria Harbour Heritage. I'll be your guide on a flight through history. Victoria Harbour got its start in 1869 when 4 businessmen joined together and formed Keene and Fowley. These 4 men were John Keene, William Ardaugh, Albert Fowley, and Richard Power. They had a mill built on the shore just east of the Hog River, and soon a small village grew up around it. For reasons unknown, the firm dissolved in 1876. Other small lumber firms utilized the mill, and the village lay dormant for almost 10 years. There was another small mill here as well, located on Burgess Point, operated by John McDermott, which only dealt mainly with shingles. In 1886, a new wind blew through the harbor, the arrival of John Waldy. This is Waldy's map, one of the original, copy of the original, 1890. Even back then, he had great plans for the village. Waldy purchased the interests of Keene and Fowley, reopened the mills, and the village became alive again. John Waldy was a native of Scotland, who came to Canada with his parents, settling in Halton County. As a young man, Waldy operated a general store in Burlington, but he was a man with greater plans. He sold his business and placed his money on white pine. In the United States, as well as in Canada, the demand for housing and construction lumber seemed without limit. The forests of the eastern states were exhausted, as well as Britain demanded more and more Canadian pine. Georgian Bay lumber companies were in a position to supply this demand. By locating here in Victoria Harbour, Waldy could draw on the unlimited forest of the whole North Shore. The logs could be rafted down to the mills and the sawn lumber shipped directly to market, either by rail or boat, and Waldy expanded as sales increased with the 2 mills operating. Disaster struck the sawmill industry in Ontario. The federal government was carrying on a Cold War of moves and counter-moves, import and export duties, with the United States, fueled by the politics of the times. First, a tariff on sawmill machinery from the United States increased to the point where sawing costs in Canada became too expensive. When the export duty on logs were removed in 1891, all but one of the 5 large mills in Midland closed. In 1897, the Digby Bill was passed by the American Congress. It imposed a high duty on shingles and lumber entering the states from Canada. The Dominion government wouldn't retaliate. Sawmills began to close all along the North Shore and southern Georgian Bay. Mill owners watched helplessly as raft after raft of logs were towed across the border. Waldy held in. He kept his mills running. He sold what he could to Canadian and British markets and stockpiled the rest. He had rows of company houses on the mill side of the tracks torn down so he could pile more. In 1897, Arthur Hardy was Premier of Ontario. He understood the hardships of the millworms, and on December 23, 1897, he made it known that under new timber regulations, effective April 1, 1898, all timber taken off government limits must be sawn in Canada. There was nothing that the Americans could do, and in turn, their mills closed. Waldy had the jump on his competitors, with millions of board feet of lumber ready to go. Lumber barges crowded the harbor, trains steamed south daily, loaded with Waldy lumber. Every car sported a banner picturing a lone man in a canoe, Victoria Harbour Lumber Company, we paddle our own canoe. He became a millionaire many times over and saved the village. In 1900, he opened up his third mill, brought in from Fenland Falls with a crew of men to erect it. Many of them stayed. Number 1 mill was what Keenan Fowley had constructed in 1869. This is number 2 mill, and it was located on the waterfront on Albert Street, right at the bottom of the hill. This is mill number 3, which Waldy purchased in Fenland Falls, had taken apart, brought to Victoria Harbour, and had it rebuilt here, along with 30 men from Fenland Falls. Most of them stayed and brought their families with them. Turn of the century, Victoria Harbour was starting to look like a village. Waldy was in a building spree. Here's the Victoria Harbour hardware store. This is the company offices. It was built about 1902, and it would have stood where the LCBO is right now. This is the Royal Victoria Hotel, and it was located where the old bank used to be and where the laundromat is and the post office. And Waldy had this built about 1902 as well. It had 30 rooms upstairs, a dining room, banquet room, and it catered to a lot of the people who came to work here. Waldy took care of his employees, always thinking of their best interests. And as well, he would have homes built for them. These are the terrace houses that were located on Jefferson Street, close to the cemetery. It's William Street at the Four Corners, looking west. The railway came to Victoria Harbour in 1878 from Wabashini. People would have to come to Victoria Harbour and then take a boat excursion to go and see the Midland that was being built, or that was growing up and a contender for the Chicago of the North. Prior to the railway coming to this area, land could be bought for $5 an acre. After 1874, the same acre of land would cost $25. Like today, they had their train wrecks back then too. This one happened just outside the harbor near the trailer park. The following is from a newspaper clipping that came from an Aurelian newspaper dated January 15, 1874. The flourishing little village of Victoria Harbour is beginning the new year in good style by forming the resolution of building a church there and presenting it to the Presbyterian body with the condition that it shall be free to all denominations for the purpose of public worship. Until such time, each separate denomination shall have a church of their own, after which time it shall become exclusively the property of the Presbyterian Church. What did happen was this became St. Mary's Catholic Church. The Protestant congregation of the village built their own church, and this one, Methodist Church, or St. John's, was finished in 1895. And it was used together with the Presbyterians and the Methodists at the time. Last things John Waldy did for the village was to build a Presbyterian church. This one was completed in June of 1906. In April of 1937, a fire had started and destroyed the Catholic Church on William Street. Along with it was the Hoffman's house, Mr. Storm's house. It's reported that the fire could be seen from Midland because the village people were very afraid of it spreading. The sparks from this fire went all the way up to Jefferson Street and started to ignite the roof of Mr. Schizler's house. This is Mr. Hoffman's double house, and they just didn't stand a chance with the fire. In 1932, a fire broke out at the back of Philip Morrow's store. The fire basically took out the whole corner section of Albert and William Street. The buildings contained the bank, Robertson's photo studio, ice cream parlor, an apartment above Mr. Morrow's store, as well as Mr. Morrow's store, which the post office was located at that point in that store. And there was a great fear that the fire would go across the street and damage the hardware store, but the winds were blowing the other way. The fire trucks came in from Midland, and there was no fire hydrants in the harbor at the time. So they had to move the fire truck down to the water's edge and pump the water into the tank to bring it up to put the fire out. But this was a problem because the fire truck kind of got stuck in the mud, and after a while of trying to get this to work, they did manage to get the fire out, but not without it causing a lot of damage. Victoria Harbour was visited by one of the most disastrous fires in its history on Tuesday. The date was September 12, 1918. The fire broke out in the cellar of a hardware store of W.H. Rumble, where a large quantity of inflammable material was stored. Within a few minutes, the whole building was a seething furnace. The explosion of cartridges, powder, and blasting supplies added to the din and destruction. The adjoining buildings on the side and the Bernie block in the rear was involved in flames and also destroyed. Mrs. O'Shelwell's restaurant, T.W. Brown's drugstore, James Burney's jewelry were also wiped out. In the rear of the Bernie block, Mrs. Allen's millinery, the Crystal Theater, and the Masonic Hall and Banquet Hall were also burned. This is the second time the Victoria Harbour Masons have suffered from fire, the first occasion being in 1916 when a portion of the same property was destroyed. For some time, the efforts of the firemen were unavailing, a heavy wind adding to their difficulties. A call was sent for the Midland Brigade, but cancelled before the men left, as the fire had been controlled. The loss, which cannot yet be estimated with any degree of accuracy, is a serious one to the village and will run into the thousands. The explosion of a large quantity of cartridges in Rumble's hardware gave the spectators a vivid idea of what machine gun fire at the front is like. The Royal Victoria Hotel, seen here in 1960, was far from being safe from fire. Fire broke out on a very cold night in February 1961. Mr. and Mrs. Jack Harvey barely had enough time to escape from the blazing building. Only the fact that there was little or no wind in the 15 below zero temperatures saved a number of adjacent buildings from sharing the same fate. In addition to the Harbour Brigade, firemen from Midland, Port-Nickel, and Wabasheen also answered the call for help. One of their main concerns was saving the joint Victoria Harbour Tay Township municipal offices, only 75 feet south of the hotel. Firemen were able to save this home only 18 feet to the east of the burning hotel from complete destruction. Waldy's tugs. This is another one of Waldy's tugs, the Charlton, that was used to bring in the rafts into the harbor. This is just an example of one of the many yachts that used to dock here. Some of them were used for excursion trips to Honey Harbor. This is Gordon Gervais, chief engineer on either the Assiniboia or the Keewatin. And Reginald Jarman. He, as well as Mr. Gervais, were Victoria Harbour residents, and they worked out of Port McNichol on the boats that used to dock there. This is a picture of the Assiniboine docked at Port Nickel. Eplett's Meat Market was one of the older businesses located on Albert Street, about where the old fire hall is right now. Philip Morrow's General Store. He had his post office in here, and this building was destroyed by fire in 1932. Mr. and Mrs. Philip Morrow. They're standing about outside, I guess it would be behind their store on William Street. Mr. Morrow was a post office clerk from 1928 to 1956. Mark Vasey was our first postmaster in Victoria Harbour. He came from the village of Vasey, which bore his name. He was also the first station agent, as well as being post office master. Henderson's Blacksmith was located right next to where the cenotaph is today. Reed's store was located on William Street. It was established in 1897, and it was basically a grocery store, and it sold other merchandise as well. Herb Murray took it over and turned it into an antique store in the late 1950s. It was destroyed by fire in the 1960s. We're just in front of Reed's store here on William Street with Philip Bergey's house in the background. This is inside the hardware store on William Street, which was first built by the Waldy Company. Corner of William and Albert Street. The large building is the hardware store, and across the street is the library. This building was built in 1916 as a gift to the village for voting for Prohibition. The building was given to the village by Fred Waldy, son of John Waldy. It's the village library again with the steeple. It was a library from 1916 to 1927. In 1927, the mills were basically gone after Fred Waldy had died. From 1927 to 1932, the building was empty. And in 1932, Robertson's Photography was put here. And after the photography business was a chemical producing business here. And in 1957, it became the offices of Tay Township, Victoria Harbour. The village office in the 1960s without its steeple. Dr. Mackenzie came to Victoria Harbour about 1915, and he married Frances Smythe. He was a doctor in Victoria Harbour for approximately 50 years. This is Dr. Mackenzie's house, about 1920s. There's a lot of sports in Victoria Harbour as well. This is an old picture of a hockey team. One of the hockey teams in Victoria Harbour, in fact, in 1905, went on to win the championship. There was also women's hockey, and of course we had baseball. Here's a photograph, the winners of the Tay Shore Baseball League Trophy of 1911. Victoria Harbour Public School was built in stages, the first one being in 1902, which was built at the back of this building. The next stage was the front part, which was completed in 1907. All denominations went to the same school. After the public school, the new public school was built, and the new Catholic school was built. The old public school was basically left as it is, as you see it now. It was turned into a shoe factory, and from the machinery, the footings have really been destroyed, and the building is basically nothing. This is a view of behind the brick part of the old school. This part was built in 1902. First bridge over the Hog River, leading into Victoria Harbour. The second bridge into Victoria Harbour was built about late 1920s, early 1930s, basically because there were cars around. Horse and buggy were a thing of the past. This is the third bridge into Victoria Harbour that was built, and the one that we travel on each and every day.
Towards the end of 1993, Victoria Harbour took pictures of all the last standing committees. This is the Parks and Recreation Committee, the Hydro Commission, the Library Board, the Committee of Adjustments, the Volunteer Fire Department, the LACT Act Committee, which name changed to Heritage Victoria Harbour, the staff that represented the village of Victoria Harbour, and the last council that represented the village of Victoria Harbour while amalgamation was taking place. The nice thing about having the facts is also that we still have long-time residents that still live here and can validate those facts.
I would just say a few words about the things which I can remember were sort of highlights, good things and bad things that have happened in the village since 1929 or 30, which is when my memory starts to click in. And the one bad thing that I remember at that time was the number 3 mill closing in Victoria Harbour, and that was the beginning of the Hungry 30s, which was a very bad time, as the old-timers will remember, and the people today couldn't even imagine what it was like. Another thing that wasn't very good was when the CPR pulled out of Port McNichol and closed up. This was caused possibly by the seaway being opened up, and the Georgian Bay ports were no longer needed for transshipment of grain to the east coast. Another thing was that shortly after Reed's closed, I was able to put up a building and get an IGA franchise and put in an IGA store and provide housing for the post office, which has been there ever since, the same building. And that building now houses the library and the laundromat. Bob, I guess you have the distinction of having led Victoria Harbour back into Hay Township, from which it was carved in the first place.
Well, I don't know about leaving it or not, but we were there. I think we were followers of it. It was a decision made by the larger municipalities of the county of Simcoe, so we
Yeah, a big project.
That's right.
Well,
We fought it and we were part of it, and now we are Day Township. So.
well, having been a Reed before, I appreciate the good work that you did while you were Reed, and congratulate you for that.
Thank you. I have to give you a word of confidence that you give us the tools and everything to work with to do what we did, like the starting of the sewer and the water and stuff like that. That was your era that that started that going on. Without that, Victoria Harbour wouldn't be what it is today. So
that's right.
I have to compliment you on that.
So the very best to you too for having done a good job afterwards and what you had to work with.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
So what was life like in as growing up in the harbour? And you're not that old, so it probably wasn't too different to what it is now. But
I really don't know any other life. I know it was pretty hard for us when we were kids. It's not like today. We didn't have the transportation or anything like that to go and play hockey or anything like that. I remember signing up for hockey and we just had no way to get there, so we didn't do it.
hockey and baseball and
Baseball and hockey and stuff like that. We always had in town. We had an outdoor rink, and we always had a ball field that was maintained. Not as good as it is today, but it was there for us. So we just went there and played at will. And we had a lot of fun. I like the harbor. I still live here, and I probably live
It
here
has
for
a
the rest of
lot
my
to
life.
offer to people.
Well, not really. I don't think it has today for career-wise. It's hard for young people to have a life here, like a good life. It's a struggle.
The transportation is
Yeah, it's good today,
to
like
other
for,
places, you know, for working.
yeah, when we were like on council and that, we kind of paid a lot of attention to the youth and everything, and tried to give them more to use, you know, to have something that they could be proud of, and we use like the ball diamonds and the rinks and, you know, whatever we could give them. Like what we done was just the start of a big plan.
My maiden name was Belcher, and my father and mother were both born in the harbor here. And so I lived a number of years here. I lived in Midland a few years, and I come back here to the harbor. I'm still living here.
What did your mother and father do in Victoria Harbour, Pearl?
My father worked over at Fort Nickel on the grain elevator, and until he passed away. And
How many children did they have?
there was 9 of us in the family, and there's still 8 of us still living. I can remember a time I had my tonsils out. I was walking up the street, and I can remember my aunt said, "No." My dad said to my aunt, she'd taken me for a walk, and he said, "She makes too much fuss. Take her, tell her, don't have it done." I had them, those days, it was different. I had them done on the kitchen table. Oh! At home. So all I can remember afterwards, every time I wanted a dish of ice cream, they would go uptown to get me a little dish, because we didn't have refrigerators or freezers then. And I can remember when we had our first radio, it was quite exciting to listen to Foster Hewitt with the Maple Leafs playing hockey, and when he'd say, "Shoot, see scores." So to remember that, we always looked forward to listening to that on Saturday night. When I got a little bit older, I was able to go a little bit, although I was quite a lot bigger than the young folks are today. On a Friday and Saturday night, we were allowed to go down and watch the train come in. It was due at 20 minutes to 10. And that was Friday and Saturday evening mostly. We had to be back home by 10 o'clock though.
Actually, I used to hear of different ones catching sturgeon, and especially when the mills were running here, the tugs were hauling the logs into this area. There was, I recall, times when you could nearly walk across the bay here to Fort McNichol on the logs.
My name is Arlene Beauchamp, and I was Irene Caddy before I was married. I married Wilfred Beauchamp in 1935. And my father had a store in 1918, and my mother, we lived behind the store, like the store was in front part of on Osborne Street.
Where was the store?
On Osborne Street. And it burned down in 1939 in January.
What kind of a store was it?
Just a wood frame, you know.
Yeah,
Grocery, general. Yeah, just a grocery store. And then we went over where Patch LeDuc and Lion is now there. They operated inside of that house for a little while till the store was built at the corner where it is now, you know. And the store was built in 1940 on Osborne and Park, and that's where and my father looked after it for a long time, and then my brother, Sanford and Florence, they were going to look after the store, but then they decided to go to Toronto, so my father went back and looked after the store again, and my mother till he died in 1956.
How did you heat the store, Irene?
Wood stove.
And would people come into the store and sort of sit around the wood stove
Yeah,
and talk?
yeah, oh yeah.
And visit?
And the little children be playing sliding down the hill, and they get cool, they go in there and get warmed up too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did your mother give them little treats sometimes?
Oh yeah, my mother was very generous. Yeah, give them little candies, give all kinds of little candies. They get 4 or 5 for a cent, like them. Yeah. And I said, how come did you quit school? At the time I didn't know, I was about 9 or 10. And I said, why didn't you keep on school, you know, after you got married? So she said there was a law then, if you got married, you couldn't teach school. That's what she told me. Yeah. If you got married, you couldn't teach school. And every year when my father had the store, we'd go down, like, you know, there was an opening down for the, down that there was no colleges, and we'd go down there and they'd had a keg of beer, you know, and they'd bring us each a bottle of pop and banana, and it was like a Christmas for us on the 1st of July, we celebrated that. My aunts and uncles all came down on our shore, and the men went in bathing suits, like, you know, they all had, the men had, the ladies had the navy blue, just terry cloth, you know, and with a little red rim around here in the sleeves. And they had little skirts like this, you know, and the men didn't. The men had skirts on theirs too, like, you know.
I'm Marjorie Eplis. I was Marjorie Bent. I lived with my uncle, Ham, and Auntie Bent. They was called that by everybody. And we didn't have any electricity. It was lamps. It was my job to keep the lamps clean. And being the youngest, I went to bed first. And I took the lamp up, and when I was finished with it, I set it on the top step. The next one got it, the next one got it, the last one blew it out.
There were many fires in Victoria Harbour, Mother.
Yes, and I remember we always got up to see where it was, and it was such an awful noise. Couldn't help but get up and go out. And we go out, as Mary said, she caught herself going up the hill, up street in her nightgown.
Yes, it was the time that the Orange Hall burned down, and it was dark. I don't know what time it was in the morning, and first we came out on the veranda, and then we found all the neighbors out, so we walked down, down onto the street, and then we walked up the hill by the Presbyterian Church, and then we thought, oh, we'll have to get closer, so we turned the corner and went down to watch the fire, and all of a sudden it began to get daylight, and oh, here we were in our night clothes. So we all scampered home. Then there was the boarding house fire. You were away for that, but I was away also, but I got a letter where I was living, and it said that the fire was so hot that the rubber boots in the corner of the hardware store closest to the boarding house melted.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to know where the fire was, believe it or not, you called the telephone office. And they knew everything, and you, even if you were phoning a friend, sometimes Ina or one of the telephone operators might say, I know she isn't home because I just saw her going down to the store. This quilt I found at Mr. Caswell's antique shop. We were looking for a table, and while my husband looked for the table, I looked through the boxes. And I happened to find this quilt, and I said, where did that come from? And he said, I bought all the things that were left from Mrs. Will Dunlop's house, and that was amongst them. And I said, how much do you want for it? And he said, oh, give me $4 and you can have it. And it has the names of many people who used to live in Victoria Harbour, doctors, ministers, local people.
What's the date?
And it also has
the date.
The date is June the 5th, 1903. And it also has the names of the 4 tugs that were here. Were they owned by the company?
Yeah.
The Waldy Lumber Company. There's the tug Charlton, the tug Lily, the tug Reginald, and the tug Lee Gill.
Well, perhaps those stories put a smile on your face or brought back a fond memory. I know that I sure had a lot of fun doing them and talking to the residents. And so that's kind of where we were in the past. Now, where are we headed in the future? I think at this time it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first mayor of the Township of Tay in the new municipality, Mayor Jack Hunter.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here, and I would like this time to take the opportunity to congratulate the Heritage Committee of Victoria Harbour for all of the work that they've been doing in collating the history of the harbour, and both the built history and the history and records of people who have lived in the harbour, and even down to street names that we have in the harbour where the streets are named after people who were here a century or a century and a half ago. The opportunity to look back is ours as we go through life, and it's very important that we have a structure that allows us to preserve what we had as we look ahead to build for the future. The preservation of many of the built heritage items in the harbour, such as homes and the public municipal building, the hardware store, are important links with the past, and they are important links to the families that are growing up here in the village today. As we look down the road, it's our hope as a municipality that we may build heritage for the future in all that we do in the buildings that we build today. The new Victoria Harbour Fire Hall that has been built some 5 years ago is an example of modern architecture, and certainly the theme that's built into that building is extending into buildings which we are building today. An example of that would be the refit, the retrofit of the municipal building on Park Street. If you'll notice here again, we've tried to incorporate some of the same architecture that you see in the fire hall building. Next to the fire hall, and during 1995, we expect to see rise our new community center, and that community center again will carry out the architectural theme that is present in the fire hall. And that theme all came to some extent from the original building built as a library, and more recently that had been used as the municipal building for the village of Victoria Harbour. We look forward as we go down the road to the formation of heritage committees in our other communities within this new community of Tay. We hope that there would be a heritage committee in Port McNicoll and in Wabasheen, and that they would encompass some of the rural area as well, in terms of looking at the past and recording our heritage. We wish the Heritage Committee of Victoria Harbour the very best in their endeavours, and we hope that some way down the line they'll be a leading force as we put together a LACAC committee for the entire municipality. It's been a wonderful opportunity to share with you today, and we look forward to sharing more of our past together in the future. Thank you.
On behalf of Heritage Victoria Harbour, I'd like to thank you all for coming and viewing our film today, taking the time. And if I could leave you with just one little thought. It's often said that history repeats itself. And in January of 1994, Victoria Harbour went back into the arms of Tate Township. And the population of today is about the same as what it was in the days of John Waldy's Canary Towne. Thank you.
he was supposed to appear, come to this here parking lot on a Sunday afternoon, so the parking lot got full of people, all people in wheelchairs and everything. So when he arrived, he seen this there lady. She looked pretty old. She was in a wheelchair. He went over to her and he put his hand on her head and he said, "God will pray for you, but you got to pray too, and I'll pray for you," and everything. And a little while after, he grabbed her hand and she got up and walked. So he was seeing another man, blind, and he went over to him and he put his hand on his head and he said, "God will cure you, and I'll pray for you, but you got to pray too," and everything. He took his hand away, and the guy said, "Boy, you got a nice suit on. See, you can see." So he seen this other young guy with a collar on his neck and his leg all bandaged up and his arm in a sling. And he went over towards him, and when he got about 5 feet from him, the man said, "Don't come any closer. Don't even touch me. I'm on compensation."